Now, the equation below shows the relationship between D, the number of miles the train travels, and T, the number of what? Hours it travels. So, when I'm reading this, I need to identify, George, what does D stand for? I'm glad you're nodding your head yes. What does D stand for? What does D stand for?
A variable.
It is a variable. What does D stand for? Catherine.
Relationship? No, the number of miles the train travels.
Very good. So D, the relationship between D is the number of miles the train travels, right? So D equals number of miles. Do we all agree with that?
Yes.
All right. And then hold on, Nanny. Then there's another variable there. T. What does T stand for? Jose.
The number of hours it travels.
The number of hours. So T is number of hours. Everybody got that so far?
Yes.
So if I'm reading this problem, I'm definitely underlining that important information because it's super duper important. D represents the number of hours. I'm sorry, the number of miles, right? And T represents the number of miles. Does that make sense? Now I could see the formula there. D equals 163T. So let's talk about it. There's my formula. D equals 163T. Now I have to understand what that's saying. What is that saying? Who could really tell me what D equals 163T means? What does that mean? What is that saying? Steph.
You have to multiply
Multiply what?
163 times 1.5.
Oh, time out. Don't tell me what to do. All I'm asking you is, what does that say? What does 163T mean? What does that mean? Miranda.
Well, if 163 and t is together, then it means multiply.
Why?
Because when a variable and a number is together, it makes it.
And that number is not called a number anymore. What do we call it now? No. The variable is T. Right? The variable is T. But now 163 is right next to that variable, so what's it called now?
163 times T.
Right? That's what's happening. But what do we call 163? Jose. A coefficient. Everybody.
Coefficient.
A what?
Coefficient.
Very good. So whenever a whole number is next to a variable, you're right, they are being multiplied, but that whole number is now called a coefficient. Okay, so we're going to drop down to the bottom of the problem. Chriselle, why don't you read that for us loud?
What is the distance in miles that train will travel in one half hour?
Right, so what's the distance in miles that the train will travel in 1.5 hours? So guess what, guys? One of the variables, we just found out what one of the variables equals. We just found out what one of those variables equal. So what does a variable equal? I see 1, I see 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Oscar.
T.
T. Right? Well, we found out what T equals. What does T equal now?
A half hour.
Excuse me?
Half an hour. 1 hour and a half.
Thank you. So T equals 1.5 hours. Now, if we know that T equals 1.5 hours, and Miranda just told me that 163, the coefficient, is next to the variable T, that means that T and 163 are being what? Multiplied. We now know what T means, so what's happening in this problem? What's happening in this problem? I see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 thinkers, only about 6 thinkers in the room? Really?
Oh, wait. Oh,
I have 163 times T. You guys just told me that T equals 1.5. So I have a whole new problem. What's my new problem, Annalise? Multiply what? 1.5. Now, guess what, Annalise? Miss Mercedes has a problem. Miss Mercedes has a very short memory. And I don't remember how to multiply mixed numbers. And I know Miss Mercedes taught it to me because we did a whole unit on adding, subtracting, multiplying, and dividing. And you know what? I can't for the life of me remember, Xavier, how to multiply a whole number and a mixed number. But I do remember that fractions have the triplets, right? Here's the triplets, right? So I can keep it as a fraction, but what else can I do to it? What else can I do to it? Lisbeth?
Decimal.
I could turn into decimal. What's the other triplet?
Percent.
Thank you. Percent. Fractions, decimals, percents, the triplets, right? So I can take this 1.5 and I can turn it into, I could leave it as a fraction. I can turn it into a percent. I could. Or I could turn it into a decimal. Which one do you think is easiest?
Decimal.
Okay, everybody agreeing? How many people agree decimal is probably the easier way to go? So here's the problem. How do I write 1.5 as a decimal? How do I write 1.5 as a decimal? Oh, no. I haven't heard anybody over here. What's going on? How do I write 1.5 as a decimal? Think about money. If I have $1.50, what does that mean? Roberto, dímelo cantando. Huh? Right. If I have $1.50, that's 1.5, right? So good. Another way to write this, instead of writing 1.5, because I don't remember how to multiply mixed numbers, but don't think for a second that I'm going to leave this lesson without showing you again, is turning this into 1.5. Everybody with me so far? All right, I'm going to blank out the screen because we don't need the problem anymore. We have 163 times 1.5. You're going to be in shock, but I'll solve it using the traditional method, right? I'm starting over here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to ignore my decimal. Ignore it. It's not there. And just multiply as is. So 3 times 5 is 15. Carry the 1. 6 times 5, 30 plus 1. And 3 times 5 is 5 plus 3 is 8. Got that so far? Now I'm going to block out that 5. I have to add a 0. Okay? And 3 times 1 is 6 times 1.
6.
And 1 times 1.
1.
Now I add. I have 5, 4, 6 plus 8.
2. 14. You get 2.
Four.
You said 2.
Answer. Now, is that my answer?
No.
What do I have to bring back? Do I just drop it?
No.
Good. What do I do? Raise your hand. Raise your hand. Raise your hand. What do I do? What do I do? Geraldine.
Count how many spaces are to the left.
Sing it, girl.
Count to the left, move to the left.
Say it again.
Count to the right, move to the left.
All right, I'm going to count to the right. 1. Move to the left. 1. So your answer could have been 244.5.
Wow. How are we going to fit all that in one training? I think
All right. Now, here's another way you could have done it. Now let's go back to multiplying mixed numbers and whole numbers, right? So another thing that I could have done is I have 163. I have 163, and it's getting multiplied by 1.5. Any suggestions? Take it back to like October. I need Oscar and Slam. Mackenzie.
So 163 an improper fraction and
Time out. How do I turn 163 into an improper fraction? Give it a numerator, a denominator of 1. Remember that?
Yeah.
Because all fractions are division problems waiting to happen, right? So when I put a 1 underneath it, all I'm saying is 163 divided by 1, which is equal to what?
163.
163, so it's the same thing. Go ahead, Mackenzie.
then you turn the 1.5 into an improper fraction.
That's right. 2 times 1
2.
plus 1.
3.
Now, do I have to flip it?
No.
Why not? Why don't I flip? Why don't I put 3 over 2 on its reciprocal? Why not?
Because you can only do that when you're dividing.
You are the bomb.com.
I know I am.
All right. Yes, you can only do that when you are dividing. Are we dividing here?
No.
No. Okay, so we're going to multiply. 163 times 3 gives me 489 over 2. Now what?
Oh.
Annalise, I have to divide it, right? Because what's wrong with this?
Improper.
So Xavier, what do I divide? Xavier, what do I divide? I have 489 over 2. What am I doing? Uh-huh. I gotta bring bobby pins. You need to pull your hair back, brother. All right. 489 divided by 2. How many times does 2 go into 4? 2. How many times does 2 go into 8? How many times does 2 go into 9? Now I'm left with 1, and we don't say remainder because remainders don't exist in 6th grade, right? No such thing as remainders anymore. We can turn it into a fraction, right? So my remainder becomes my
Well, you just said
remainder becomes my what?
And the denominator is 2.
And the denominator stays the same, right?
Yeah.
So that would have been another way to say it. Same answer,
Different.
2 different ways. Yes, ma'am.
I did the same thing like that. Well, I didn't move to the right and put it to the left. I just wrote it down. So I got 24.45.
Be careful. Okay, otherwise Geraldine's gonna be singing to you all day.
But
Count to the right, move to the left. He's gonna do the dance. Juan's gonna tell you how amazing he is. Yes.
Yeah, let's just some more. This.
Mm-hmm.
Alright. So we gotta go from here, move to the left, move to the right.
count to the
You're gonna listen. You're gonna count how many numbers are to the right in the entire problem. So how many numbers are to the right to the decimal?
1.
And that's how many spaces you're gonna move to the left. So count to the right, move to the left.
I got it.
I,
Yeah,
I.
Copy.
On that one, couldn't you, like, you would have gotten the same answer, but also you could have put the decimal.
I could have added a decimal, add a 0, right? I could have done that too, and I would have ended up with the same answer. Maya, how'd you do yours?
Since it's at 1 hour and a half, I just put 153 first for an hour, and then I divided 2 by 163, and I got 81.5. And then I added 163 plus 81.5, and I got 223.
So what Maya thought about was that this is actually talking about time, right? So she says, if it's gonna be 1 hour, then that's 163, right? But then I also need the half. So she said, let me find half of 163, which gave you 84.5, 81.5, right? So half of 163, 81.5. So then she takes the 81.5 and adds that to the 163 to make the whole hour and a half. So let me explain. If in 1 hour, it'll be 163, right? You still needed the other half. So she finds what's half of 163, which gives her 81.5. And then she just added those 12, which gave her 244.5. So good, Maya. Awesome strategy. Anybody else?
I did that same thing.
Good. Jose.
I did a proportion.
Ooh, tell me how you did a proportion.
I changed the hours into minutes.
Okay, so talk to me.
So I did 163 over 60 minutes. And then I put X over 90 minutes.
I did that.
So Jose says if it's 163, right, in an hour, 60 minutes is worth an hour, right?
Yeah.
But he converts it to minutes because when you write a proportion, the units have to be what?
Equal.
That's right. The units have to be the same, right? So minutes to minutes. So he says I have 163. In an hour, I have 60 minutes, right? And then he goes, but what about 90 minutes? 90 minutes is an hour and a half, right? In an hour is 60. Half an hour is 30 minutes. 60 plus 30, 90 minutes, right? over X. We wanna know how much it's gonna be. And then you did the cross multiplication, you got your answer. Amazing. What's that, 4 or 5 different strategies? I'm so impressed. You guys are the best. All right, let me tell you what we're gonna do today. Our flow is on the board. We started off with our do now, which was just to go over this exit slip. We're gonna take a quiz. And then I have a menu for you to do. There's 10 questions. They're all multiple choice except for the first one. And the first question, you have to answer it on the front of the page. So you're gonna get your answer sheet that looks like this, where you're gonna put in your answers. This is the only thing that I will be collecting, right? Number 1, you're gonna have to do it here on the bottom. So when you get it, you're gonna see it's number 2 to 10, right? Number 1, you're gonna answer it right here on the bottom. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And then the answer page is here for you, and you get to keep it and use it to study. ¿Comprende? ¿Alguna pregunta? Questions? Elías, ¿entendido? I just gotta check up on you, my brother. Questions? Okay. Go to your testing keys. You have 30 seconds to get here. Seconds. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4,
It don't matter.
3, 2, take that chair. Sit the table. And 1. All right, the first thing I'm going to give to you is your answer sheet.